public-private partnership webinar for 2026. And this is a very important webinar. It talks about infrastructure development in our country, most importantly, bridging the infrastructure deficit across sectors in energy, in transport, road sector, tourism, basically trade and economy. So we've got experts lined up. And I must also mention that participating in this webinar, if you're a licensed member of the EIZ, you stand an opportunity to earn 2 CPD points. As you know, the EIZ has recently been admitted to the Washington Accord. This is a premium class for legislators and regulators for engineering practice across the world, including the United States, notably the UK, Australia, New Zealand, China, Japan. So what this means is that going forward, for you to retain your practice license, you need to accumulate a minimum number of CPD points per annum, meaning that you either present something under the EIZ umbrella for the benefit of the engineering fraternity. Alternatively, you participate in a presentation such as this one so that you gain knowledge for your professional continuous development. Having said that, we come to this very important presentation today, where we've lined up some of our elite members who are experts in the field of infrastructure development. In studio, I'm talking about in studio, at the engineering house here, I'm joined by Engineer Cuthbert Munankwenka, fellow of the EIZ. He's Executive Director for Energy and Infrastructure at the Presidential Delivery Unit here in Zambia. I also acknowledge that some members are joining us across the borders of Zambia. You are welcome to join us. Cuthbert is leading the national delivery targets in energy, infrastructure, and trade facilitation under the Zambia Presidential Delivery Unit, PDU. He enjoys a 20-year consulting engineering background, and he has previously led projects delivering teams in energy, rail, highway, airports, border terminal developments in Europe and the SADC. He is a registered quantity surveyor with the Zambia Institute of Quantity Surveyors, a fellow of the Engineering Institution of Zambia, a professional member of the Engineering Institution of Zimbabwe, ZIE, and a professional member of the Botswana Engineers Registration Board, ERB. Welcome, Cuthbert, to the PPP webinar.
Thank you, President Wesley, and good evening, participants and listeners.
Thank you very much. The other participant who's joining us online is Engineer Kanyuka Mumba, a fellow of the EIZ and a member of the Association for Consulting Engineers of Zambia. Engineer Kanyuka Mumba is a civil engineer and a management executive with over 29 years of experience in infrastructure planning, project management, and civil works design. He is a fellow of the Engineering Institution of Zambia and a member of the Association for Consulting Engineers of Zambia. He contributes to advisory committees guiding the government and the National Assembly, mostly under the EIZ. He has really helped the EIZ through the years, committees of public and private relations and national development. He has extensive expertise in public-private partnerships, having led Zambia's first road PPP in 2015 as Director and Chief Executive Officer of the Road Development Agency. I think this is the Kasomeno to Mwenda Road project, where he's actually also consulting. In the private sector, he continues to support major PPP projects, including the Kasomeno to Mwenda Road project between Zambia and the Democratic Republic of Congo. That is my former boss at RDA. Good evening, Kanyuka.
Good evening, President Kaluba. Good evening, fellow members of EIZ. I'm happy to be here to share our experiences regarding PPPs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Engineer. The third participant is Engineer Joseph Miti Goma. He's Chief Engineer Planning for PPPs under the Road Development Agency. Engineer Joseph Goma is a registered professional engineer with 20 years in the road sector. He is a Commonwealth alumnus holding a Masters in Civil Engineering, Geotechnics from the University of Strathclyde, UK. As an engineer planning PPPs at the Road Development Agency, he leads road infrastructure projects under the PPP framework. He has served also as Chief Engineer Design and Research and as Principal Engineer Pavements and Materials, contributing to designs, standards, audits, and research. His expertise covers asset management, project appraisal, procurement, and implementation of major donor-funded projects. Regionally, he's the Vice Chair of the ASANRA Materials and Design Standards Committee and serves on multiple technical committees. Good evening, Joseph. I presume you're joining us online.
Good evening. Thank you very much, Mr. President, Engineer Kaluba. Thank you, and I'm joining online. Yes, indeed. Thank you.
Okay. And from the Ministry of Finance, we've got Mr. Solomon J. Simutowe. He is under the Public-Private Partnerships Office in the Ministry of Finance and National Planning. Mr. Simutowe is a seasoned public-private partnership PPP specialist with over 8 years of experience in project development and promotion. He leads business development appraisals, planning and technical coordination at PPP initiatives, guiding projects from concept and feasibility studies with contracting authorities through commercial viability analysis, procurement, and negotiations. Before joining the PPP office, Mr. Simutowe built a diverse career in finance and government, serving as a credit officer at Bank of China, Zambia, an economist of the Ministry of Commerce, project officer at the EU CBPSD, senior economist at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and principal officer at the Ministry of Finance. So as you can see, he's got a good blend of experience in the public finance and also in the private sector. Good evening, Solomon.
Good evening, and happy to be here. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you very much. We've got, as you can see, our participants and dear listeners, we've got a team of diverse experience in PPP frameworks. Public-private partnerships in Zambia are governed by the Public-Private Partnership Act number 18 of 2023. And this is managed under the Public-Private Partnership under the Ministry of Finance and National Planning. The framework leverages private capital and expertise to accelerate infrastructure development and deliver social services. This is very important, as you know, as a country which is constrained with public finances in our treasury. So we say we need still to build infrastructure and we need to leverage private capital coming in so that we can give space to the treasury. So this is an innovative way of raising infrastructure. And then I'm going to throw my questions to my team here to just get to understand basically how this principle works. I'll start with Cuthbert here, closer to me. Cuthbert, are you able to explain what the key difference is on PPP projects compared to traditional public procurement or design bid build models? So maybe just try to contrast between the PPP framework and also the ZPPA administered projects where there are bids and people bid for them. There's a substation document. It's assigned to a contractor to deliver a project which is handed over to Zambia immediately.
Thank you, President Kaluba. But again, even before I get into this, I think it's only befitting for me to say congratulations. You've made us really proud on getting admitted to the Washington Accord. It's not a main achievement. We're only, the fourth, transitional member within the continent. I think it does bring us a lot of pride in terms of advancing our capabilities and also our global reach as a fraternity. Yeah, but without really getting into too much details, so the PPP framework is basically what we have chosen as a country, and through the enactment of the PPP law, it's a PPP Act of 2023 that allows private sector developers to collaborate with the government in delivering infrastructure. Now, this is different from what we are traditionally used to, where we use the sovereign account or the public fiscus to be able to drive infrastructure projects for public and commercial use. So the distinct difference between the two is basically, the way that procurement for these projects is conducted, whereas the former case, we expect private sector developers, investors, business houses, and even institutes like the EIZ have the right to actually raise capital, design bankable projects, and then participate in a collaborative mechanism with the government to be able to churn out these projects. And typically, such investment bodies are in this development, initiative for return on investment. Whereas the other one is basically where you have, in the latter case, it is where you basically have government exercising its ascribed right to provide infrastructure to the public through the use of tax revenue or debt revenue, as we may obviously contract through the national debt contracting system. And we're utilizing and deploying these resources to build schools, roads, and highways, as it were. And again, most of that, the latter case leverages on the statutes that we have brought up through the ZPPA and other public procurement rules that might apply at any of these stages. So that's basically the distinct difference. It's really about the source of the capital on building either of these two projects.
Yes, thank you very much, Cuthbert. I think you have basically outlined what a PPP is and how a PPP is distinguished from traditional, or let me say conventional bid jobs which government assigns to a contractor or under an EPC for a government-funded project. And therefore, we're able to see that the public sector is basically initiating. It's very possible for a government institution to initiate, and that could be a solicited bid. But there are also in certain cases where there are unsolicited bids. Cuthbert, you tried to explore there. It means the public sector set goals, and then we are trying to leverage private sector efficiencies to deliver outcomes that are favorable for the nation. Are you able to maybe just try to think of what kind of skills are required, either in the engineering domain or even outside, for our people, for us to be able to deliver good PPP projects? Are you able to identify what kind of attributes are required?
Yes, indeed, President Wesley. I think as an engineering profession, we are always finding ourselves with great use within the PPP framework, because predominantly, and we have seen this especially in our case, even though we are a relatively new market for PPP projects as a country, but we have seen the increasing, the increased requirement of engineering skills in there. Of course, engineers will play different roles, from project conception, design, and all this. Now, these are skills that we are taught in schools as engineers, but because of the uniqueness in terms of risk sharing around the PPP projects, you'd realize that we are also increasingly needing to have a bit of, legal skills and, finance and packaging skills in order for us to have an end-to-end solution for providing, viable engineering projects. Because clearly these PPP projects are driven primarily by the return on investment. So the intention at this point is not really to primarily provide social goods, but it is also to give investable projects that will drive the developer not only being able to put his money into that for providing goods or services to the public, but also to get his return on the investment. So as engineers, obviously, we are expected to do the usual mundane things that we do, making sure that we design this infrastructure properly, making sure that we are managing risk in terms of safety. We are managing risk in terms of bankability, so that we are actually able to sell these projects out there to would-be funders. So yes, we need our core engineering competences of designing for safety, feasibility, fit for purpose, and also most recently very prominent subjects of environmental safeguards and government. So at the end of the day, these are some of the core skills that we need to be able to deliver this project.
Thank you very much, Cuthbert. I think now I can take you to Engineer Kanyuka Mumba. An impressive CV you have there, Kanyuka. Having been served as a Director for Planning and Design in the Road Development Agency, and then I noticed that you also served as Director for Road Construction and Rehabilitation.
Yes.
And this also means that you've been involved in the formulation of the law as a technocrat, and also helped us to implement that, and also monitoring and evaluation, because right now you're a consultant. So we've got like 360-degree view in what you have. So we'd like to learn something from you. I'll take you to project identification and preparation phase, particularly in feasibilities, before we look at the project, how viable it is, what inputs, engineering inputs and assessments are critical, are most critical during feasibility studies to make the project bankable, and what kind of factors are we looking at to attract private partners? As you answer that, I would also like you to maybe take a look at what engineers, how do engineers ensure that output specifications in a PPP tenders are clear? This is in the solicitation documents. They are measurable, they are flexible enough to allow innovation without compromising quality or safety. And also what we don't want is to prescribe the solutions to the private sector, because they are the ones who are innovative. So how do we navigate around that? Over to you, Mumba.
Thank you so much, President. That's quite a mouthful. I'll try and bite off what I can. So first of all, I'm happy to share my experiences on PPPs, having had the experience I have in implementing PPPs from planning to implementation. So I consider myself, privileged somewhat that I've been in a situation or position where I've been exposed to PPPs. Before I delve into the question, probably it would be important to just take a step back a little bit to look at where we're coming from with PPPs as a country. I remember, I think the first shot by government at PPPs was around 2009, when government formulated the PPP policy, which was then followed by the PPP Act of 2009. But of course, at that time, it was a new concept. Government was still trying to feel its way around, including the road sector or the private sector as well, when we talk about infrastructure PPPs. There were studies conducted as well, I think around 2010, 2012, which came back with conclusions that PPPs were not viable in Zambia because we did not have enough traffic, for instance, on our roads, because at that time, the PPPs were focusing mainly on the road sector. Sorry.
Are you there? Okay. No,
yes. Just a second. Something has given up under me. Maybe I'm getting too much. Okay, so I'm back. Okay. So I'm back. Don't worry, I'm okay.
Okay.
So
we didn't see that video, can you?
If I wasn't going to the gym, it would have been a different matter, but I'm fine. Okay, so yeah, I may continue.
Yes, please continue. Yes.
Okay, thank you. So like I was saying, then I think around 2015, well, government persevered really, and then implemented the first PPPs. And from there, here we are. I think we are now at a space where government is implementing PPPs full scale. So when it comes to matters of what to identify in the planning phases, right through to procurement and implementation. I would say typically like any other engineering project, and when I focus on PPPs, that is that are for infrastructure, I would basically say the principles are pretty much the same in terms of how you proceed with implementing PPPs right from inception, from planning, feasibility studies. You look at the same factors as you would look at any other ordinary engineering project. Of course, for the private sector, what is important is viability, feasibility, and therefore, I think also the aspects of commercial viability, the aspects of the legal environment, and also the aspect of financial does play a part. And therefore, you tend to see that the private sector will focus more, if it's a road, for instance, will focus more on the aspects of the traffic. They'll want to see what traffic volumes are available on the road. They'll be happy to see off-take prospects in terms of who an off-taker will be. If it's any other project other than a road project, which involves infrastructure. So all those aspects are key to then be able to, for the private sector, run your financial models and then see in what period and for how long it will take you to recoup your investment. So typically, those are the key aspects that private sector would look at. In terms of engineering design, feasibility studies, and all that is pretty much the same as a traditional procurement. Then also, when it comes to the actual implementation and in terms of, I'm happy you mentioned a key issue on straight jacketing or being overly prescriptive and not to limit the private sector. Yes, indeed, yes. It's important to mention that PPPs are very much a business. PPPs are a business, and the private sector is in the business of PPPs to make money. They are not there to come and do things for free. So what the private sector would normally want is to be given latitude, and I'm happy that over the years, government has been refining the PPP laws, has been refining the regulatory environment of PPPs to try and ensure that as much latitude is provided and as much space is provided to the private sector to exercise their innovation, exercise the ability to look beyond just an infrastructure and also see a business case in what they're getting involved in. So ideally, like I was saying, the private sector know what they want, they know where the business is, and when they come to government with a solution, they will usually already have undertaken immense studies, immense investigations, run their financial models to try and ensure that a business case is made for a PPP that they get into. You may refresh the other aspects of the question in case I didn't cover some of them.
Yes, I think you have comprehensively gone through most of what we're talking about. You've talked about solicitation documents, how to prepare them, and how the law has evolved. But I think now we can get into, because a PPP typically is just a risk allocation and management. So there's an area of risks that are shared between the private sector and the public sector. Fundamentally, what you and Cuthbert have presented is that there's a risk for finance, which the private sector takes over, and the government concentrates on those risks which they are best suited to handle. Yeah. I think let me introduce Joseph at this point. From an engineering perspective, you've been in the RDA for some time, where you are now chief engineer for planning for the PPPs in basically, and you've done a lot of work in materials and design standards. From an engineering perspective, how should technical risks, for instance, ground conditions or design changes after the PPP has already been signed, and we have looked at the net present value in terms of futuristic outflows compared with the net present value of current inflows. And and then suddenly the design changes, meaning that maybe that is going to affect the concession period or the tariff, which I'll say the toll, which has been projected in the financial model. I want you just to talk about how these factors, the design changes, technological obsolescence, which was projected to be used, or unforeseen site issues. Maybe the road was supposed to pass. We're talking about roads, but it could be any kind of infrastructure. It could be a stadium. It could be a hospital. As we know, certain models of PPPs, like in the USA, a number of prisons in the USA, you've seen movies, they run on PPPs. The private sector runs the prison, you know. Of course, we haven't reached that kind of scope in Zambia, but also you can do border and airports. They can be run by a private sector. They can be built, and then they're recouping through parking fees or things like that. But I just want to, Joseph, to talk about when conditions change, technical conditions on the ground. The PPP has already been signed and it's enforced. How can this be handled and allocated between the public and private partnerships? Talk about risk allocation. What are the basic concepts from your understanding and also from the engineering experience? And I would like you also to share examples where risk allocation in the Zambian model have worked well or they've went wrong. And what kind of engineering lessons have we learned from the projects that we have implemented and you have foreseen? Over to you, Joseph.
Thank you, President Kaluba. Yes, so I'll start with even before we get to the stage after the concession has been signed. The aspect of risk allocation has to be dealt with from the beginning of the PPP project, from the inception stages. So during the feasibility studies, we ensure that a detailed analysis are done so that all the potential possible risks to do with which may come, for instance, at implementation stage are dealt with. So when it comes to maybe change of circumstances, maybe the materials or maybe the ground conditions, as you've put it, you find that at that stage, these usually are addressed in the contract itself, where usually the design risks are allocated to the concessionaire. So it starts from the beginning, where you are supposed to allocate each risk to the party that is best placed to manage and mitigate or absorb the risk. So if, for instance, it's a solicited project where there are detailed designs and those and the basis is on the detailed designs that, for instance, they were done by the contracting authority. In that case, there should be provisions that are going to address in the changes in the event that there's a change. There'll be a shared risk there. But if everything is done, for instance, by the concessionaire, is through the unsolicited approach, so they'll bear the full risks that will come as a result of, for instance, ground changes in the time of implementation. So everything has to be well crafted at the beginning of the when you are doing the risk allocation, so that the risks are allocated to the best suited party. We don't want, for instance, government to take up a risk that is as a result of maybe inadequate studies undertaken by the private party. So in terms of managing under the PPPs, that is generally how it is managed. You from the beginning at the beginning in the inception stages, you identify which risks are best suited for the private party or for government, and then during implementation, those provisions are usually indicated in the contracts, how to address risks that are, for instance, design-related risks or inadequate studies that have been undertaken. So unless there's something else that I've left out on that aspect.
Okay, I don't know if you are able to, you've explained very well. I think the model that is used to risk identification allocation, but I don't know if you are able to speak into the current examples in our domain where risks have been allocated and worked very well, or you would like to talk about where we have got some lessons in the projects that we have in the public domain. You can just highlight that we allocated good risks here and there and it went well, or there we're still learning something that, because this is a process for us, we continue implementing PPPs.
Thank you very much. So I'll indicate that since the implementation of these PPPs is also relatively new, we've had some lessons learned, but some of them at least have been addressed, because at the time when we are developing the projects, some of the risks, for instance, particularly the one we are talking about, were allocated to the right party. For instance, you've seen, I think, some examples where we've had maybe premature failures. If you check in the concession agreements, mostly you find that the design risk is allocated to the private party. Hence, the government is not exposed to those risks of correcting those defects. You find that the concessionaire bears the risk, because the design and all the design inputs, considerations, investigations were done by the private party, and they bear those. So that's an example of where it is working well for the government, where the private party is mandated to address those risks related to inadequate performance during implementation of the PPPs.
Okay, thank you very much, Joseph. I think I'll get into Solomon now. I think what we have mostly discussed is basically PPP projects in the road sector, but I want Solomon to give us an overview of PPPs, because PPPs can cover various sectors. And Solomon, are you able to just give us insight without disclosing much, how the pipeline sits for us in other sectors such as energy, transport, tourism, health? You just try to give us a picture of how PPPs are doing. And as you do so, I noticed that you are also an economist. You can tell us from your measurements where we are sitting with willingness to pay as a ratio, and also social acceptance of PPPs, because it's critical. End users need to pay user fees, and the user fees are the ones which translate into payback for the investors. So maybe just give us a synopsis. As Zambia, we are venturing into PPPs as a new model for infrastructure development. How can you rate our sustainability, acceptance of PPPs? Do we have 800 proposals, or maybe you can give us just a picture? We have got unsolicited proposals in the water sector. How many do you think? And then how is this field growing? Over to you.
Thank you so much. Just an overview, like on the pipeline, we've about 51 projects on the PPP pipeline in various sectors. I think about 2 months ago, that stood about maybe US 5.1 billion, assuming these projects are actualized in the future. Of course, we have a lot of road projects per se, but we also have got other projects that are at various stages of the PPP cycle. As you may know, that when we talk about PPP pipeline, we are not talking about unsolicited proposals. We are talking about projects that have been initiated by government agencies, such as ministries, agencies, parastatal bodies, quasi-government institutions, etc. Maybe just looking at water, we have about 2 PPP water projects. One is the Kafio bulk water project. It is an unsolicited proposal, and another one is the Lusaka West water project. We've also got projects in the commercial.
Sorry, I think you can mute there. We can get feedback from the other who are not on the floor, or other participants who are not speaking. Kindly mute.
So we also have got projects.
Yes.
Yeah, we have projects in the commercial real estate. One of them is East Park that you know. We have a number of projects in the border post projects, some of which have been combined with the road projects. We also have a PPP in the rail sector, the Tazara rail sector. The Lobito corridor is also a PPP in the making. And we quite have a number of projects in the health sector. Quite some interesting projects, and I think there should be more than 5, if I have to say. On energy projects, we have a solar project which we are carrying out with one of the contracting authorities. And a few years ago, we had also attempted at solar implementation in some rural areas as PPPs. And one of the other projects was actually a hydropower station, of course, about 0.66 kilowatts. In terms of tourism, what we are seeing is a mixed-use development where there is some project and maybe there's a hotel at that facility, maybe some commercial use, office, residential use, and a hotel. So, but not entirely as just a tourism project as per se. Then we also have a number of projects in the educational sector. The student hostels, lecture theaters. One of them is Mulungushi University, also UNZA. I think there's another project in the offing at CBU and other institutions. So this is basically the kind of pipeline setup we have, and it's growing day by day. We also have a number of unsolicited proposals, of course, which are not in the pipeline for the simple reason that these projects, once we receive them, there is a need to safeguard the intellectual property in terms of information, their feasibility studies, etc. So we do not really divulge much other than at the stage of once one is approved through a preliminary evaluation, then maybe there's a competing proposal when it's advertised in the papers. In terms of willingness to pay, there are two aspects there. There's clients or customers' ability to pay, and also clients or customers' willingness to pay. So unfortunately, sometimes there's a mismatch in when proposals are received, mostly like unsolicited proposals, because you can see quite frankly that maybe the private party, the investor, developer, etc., they're trying to do financial focus in the financial modeling based on the customer's willingness to pay, not their ability to pay. So the danger in that is that if as an office or the contracting authority does not see that problem, you may find that you end up in project failure after some time. Because really, if you are earmarking a project to cater for about 100 traffic, and you do the customer's willingness to pay, you find that maybe only 40 or 30 are able to pay for that service. So it will be a white elephant, so to say. Yes,
no, I think hold it there, Solomon. Thank you very much. I think you have brought in a very good component where we mistake willingness to pay with affordability. And that could, maybe some consultants haven't been telling us the truth. They try to promote a project And then when the concessionaire gets into finalizing it, they find other problems, and maybe that could be the reason. But I just want you to talk about financial closure. The other day, I had lunch with the ZESCO MD, Justin, and he was bemoaning a number of proposals that have come in the energy, but they're not getting closed. So the government does everything you're asking us to do. We help you out with the certification and everything, environmental impact assessments through the Ministry of Energy. You get everything. And then when they go, they don't come back. So the financial closure takes long. And I think this is also the same with you, Mumba Kanyuka. You were talking about having studied that Munankwenka 2015, and then it's only recently. So what have we learned about this financial closure taking so long? Or what can the public sector do to help private developers close their proposals? What have we learned, Solomon, from where you're seated? What could be the issues that we need to remove so that we achieve so much closure, maybe 90% of closure, financial closure?
Thank you once again. I think the first one I'll start with before it slips out of my mind, it's the same customer's willingness to pay. You find that most projects, the financial model is based on that instead of the customer's ability to pay. They don't put into consideration like, okay, year 1 to year 3, customers are willing to pay maybe 20 kwacha to pass through the road tolls. Maybe from year 3 to 5, maybe customers would pay maybe just 5% of the tariff hike, for instance. You find that they're basing them, more especially in projects which maybe haven't tested the waters, on the fees that are aligned to the customer's willingness to pay. The other one is project structuring. You find that for a PPP project to be robust and successful, there are 4 fundamentals that you need to take into consideration. One of them is value for money, affordability, risk sharing, and benefit to the public. So when you're looking at the benefit to the public, you're looking at providing that infrastructure to the public at a fee that they're able to afford. Risk sharing, my colleagues have talked about it, and value for money, I will not go into it, but fundamentally, again, risk sharing, affordability, customers benefit, etc., they are all sub-factors of value for money. If you look at affordability itself, it has 2 components, again, with to the public, where they're able to afford to pay that fee that you have prescribed, and to the government, where the government does not come in to pay, for instance, contingent liabilities, or try when the demand falls because it was not projected properly. The private sector now says, government, can you come in because we cannot meet our monthly revenues or yearly revenues, meaning we've got principal and interest to pay for the debt that we put on the project. So basically, these 4 principles, they culminate into what you may call the structuring of the project. So you find that when the proposal moves along, everything, negotiations, etc., it has, of course, the technical proposal and the financial proposal, and it's signed, and the investor goes to the bank to say, I've signed this agreement. It's where the project is worth $100 million, and I need some money so that I can start construction and eventually operations. Now, what happens is the banks will carry their own due diligence, more especially on the commercial viability of the project. So they will specifically look at what Mr. Kanyuka indicated, the business case of the project. Specifically, the market analysis, market reports, everything else. They will look at that. And if the project seems to be misaligned, they will not tell you to say, no, where you are missing is this part. Another thing that is actually coming on is the environmental aspect. More especially now, we are standing at a stage where most of the projects, we have got these climate change issues. So what happens?
So hold it there. I think since you're getting into sustainability and resilience, it will come later. I think I'll need to focus on it. But I'll come to Cuthbert. Cuthbert, thankfully, you have been involved in policy formulation and also just basically removing the red tape around PPPs to make them much more capable of closing and getting into feasible projects, working at the presidential delivery unit. How much traction have we made as a country in terms of removing red tape around PPPs to make them much more attractive to the private sector? And what other areas are you possibly looking at, working with P1 to help us improve the closure of PPP projects?
Yeah, thanks, President Wesley. So what we have seen, again, because like I said earlier, this is a relatively new PPP market. Our country is a relatively new PPP market. But in order to accelerate financial closure on most of these projects, it has become, like you observed, necessary to thin out the red tape. And one of the things that we have also seen, for instance, is, this tunnel vision when we are looking at creating value around the offtake of these projects. Because as you know, to build a road, normally what we take into consideration is projected, first of all, current traffic and then projected traffic growth, right? But in order for you to hit the numbers right where you're supposed to hit them in terms of financial closure, you need to know that it is not only the projected traffic that you're going to be targeting based on economic growth models. And I think this is one of the mistakes that we've seen many of these developers come through. They'll just say, okay, the economy is growing at 5%. So currently we have 100 cars passing per year. So 5% next year we'll have 105, and then you put that into your financial model. But we have also seen that in order for us to accelerate and balloon up the numbers, the offtake numbers, we have to cut a lot of red tape around a whole ecosystem. So when you are building a road, for instance, and there is, say, a core tenement down the road, you need to obviously look at how much red tape you can take out under the road investment model. But clearly, you also need to open up the red tape that would hinder the development of a core minefield, which is just ahead of the stream. So that at the end of the day, even if you are projected a 5% growth in traffic, you can leverage on eased out red tape in the mining sector, for instance, so that you can also create a possible PPP right along the road.
Yes.
So that at the end of the day, you are able to get offtake volumes based on the ecosystem that you built around the project. So we always get this tunnel approach in terms of what we're trying to build. Okay, if you're building a school, for instance, and you want to build a school, say a university in a place. When we go to the PPP Council, what we've seen with most of these developers is that they'll just say, yes, this is my revenue model. There will be X students paying X amount per month and all that stuff. So when you put that into a viability model, you either have to extend your concession or raise the toll. But we are forgetting about, potential for housing around that complex. So if you've just gotten that piece of land for a university and you have not looked at the ecosystem that is going to support that and actually build it into the model, you realize that every time we're going to be failing to reach financial closure. So our approach has been that once you have an investment vehicle that you want to run within a sector, you have to also look at cutting red tape in all the other ancillary project streams that are going to support that asset. And you have seen this in terms of the energy sector, for instance. Okay, we've opened up the energy sector for private developers, although not under the proper PPP law. But what we have done is cut down the licensing red tape around the energy. But at the end of the day, not just about the licensing, but we've also cut down taxation red tape on importation of equipment and everything. So we're creating an ecosystem that allows the thriving of these PPP projects in a way that is going to make them viable. Yeah.
I think that is good. You have explained very well. And I think what I've liked, you've explained about mushrooming projects that could come with a PPP. And I think what most developers don't see, prospective concessionaires, is that a PPP project can grow exponentially beyond what we have envisioned. Once you've got a good project, downstream there are other traffic opportunities that can come in on the project, which we never even envisaged. But I'm also aware that there's that clause in PPP concession agreements, which talks about MAGA, material adverse government action. I think most private sector are very scared, thinking maybe downstream there's a change of government or the government starts hammering them. You know, they are very much scared of this, and I think we haven't been helping because of the tension that we put in our country. How does the government or the public sector ensures that we protect the private sector amidst outrageous, let me just call them outrageous decisions that governments are bound to make over a 25-year period? Because 25-year concession is very long.
Yeah.
A government can change its thinking and then you hit private investors. Are we working on doing this? And what are the concerns from the public sector in terms of this huge risk?
Yeah, thank you so much. You see, we have life case scenarios of how political risk actually gets priced into the PPP, development environment. And luckily, as a country, I think our political risk perception is fairly moderate. Okay, so that allows us to even drive investor appetite within the PPP space. But we did see, I just can't remember one of the border posts that
it is which one is it? Direct Kasumbalesa.
That's the one.
Yes,
yeah.
Yes.
So again, I think that's a classical case of how political risk sort of comes in and actually distorts the market. But the thing is that if you cannot create a predictability model around, the political position of a country, you realize that even just one small glitch on one project, the shockwaves are so far-reaching that the healing cycle is usually in years. And sometimes the healing cycle is a whole political regime, where you even say, yeah, but you see, that regime that we had was very aggressive towards him, even if it was just one small project. So at the end of the day, and I think, like Kanyuka said earlier, at the end of the day, we've seen that there's been repetitive refinement of the laws and the rules that govern PPP development within this country. The act itself, the first act, I think, was 2009. That was repealed several times. Actually, it was amended several times. Then we got a whole repeal 2 years ago through Act number 18 of 2023. But the idea was to also make sure that we are creating a predictable environment where we cut down political, risk attribution, and where we also make sure that there is proper investment protection laws. With the ZDA Act, I think there is, in fact, most of these PPP projects normally get an investment protection and promotion agreement with the ZDA.
With the ZDA, yes.
So that it creates another layer of, safety in terms of providing appetite for investors to put their money in. So yes, again, it's a very young PPP market, but the level at which reform is happening, I think it is it's quite strong, and we believe that with the more PPP projects we're going to convert, the better we're going to even refine the market. And this is a market that is very exploited. But the thing is, like I said, we need to create those backward and forward linkages in terms of the projects that we are creating, so that they exist within an ecosystem that has got consistent and coherent investment laws.
Thank you very much, Cuthbert. You can see Cuthbert has talked about investor confidence and trust in these models. It can be built and then it can have far-reaching impact across generations. So how best do we protect private sector interests, and how government is thinking about that? Kanyuka, I think let's look at construction and project delivery phase. What are the most common engineering and delivery challenges during the construction phase of PPP projects? I know right now you're fully involved with the Kasomeno Mwenda as a consultant. Maybe your experiences without getting so much information, but you can give us insights on how does the partnership model help mitigate delays or cost overruns? Do you go with the FIDIC blueprints, or it's just specifically the concessionaire agreements? How can early and ongoing collaboration between public authorities and private consortia and the engineering teams be optimized for smoother execution of the construction and project delivery phase?
Thank you very much, President. So ideally, as has been mentioned earlier, the idea behind PPPs really, and the key difference with traditional contracts under public procurement, apart from the procurement methods themselves and the regulatory framework, is actually the risk allocation, I think, as we've heard. Ideally, PPP projects, and I'm going to talk about infrastructure PPP projects. They're usually projects that the private sector takes most of the risk on. They take the risks of the design, they take the risks of the commercial viability, and they also take even the legal risks and financial risks. So when it comes to construction as well, usually these are design and build contracts wherein the private sector takes all the financial risks associated with the design and implementation of the project. So these are lump sum, and any changes downstream after the award of the concession during the construction is a risk to the private party. And the concession agreements are written in such a way that they absolve the public party or government from taking any of these risks on their table. So as I indicated earlier again, the private sector, as they come into participate in a PPP, they should really have done their homework, should have done their background. And usually PPPs from the government side, the ideal situation is they are developed to at least feasibility study or detailed feasibility study stage where information is available, which the private party can then pick up and then build on and do their own investigations. And by the time they are deciding to participate in such a PPP, they have all the information they require on the ground. Now, remember again, profit and cost effectiveness is a hallmark of the private sector. They are here to make money, they want to make money, and at the same time, be able to deliver infrastructure without compromising standards or lowering standards, but in a more cost-effective and efficient manner. So usually during construction and also in the design phase, the private sector will propose design solutions or construction methods or even construction materials that, while not compromising the quality, may help in mitigating costs, may help in making the overall cost of the project lower, but like I should emphasize, without compromising the quality. So even as the PPP is ongoing during construction, typically, depending on how large the PPP is, construction phase may even be 3 years, there'll be continuous innovation, continuous design optimization and refinement to ensure that the costs are kept to a minimum as far as possible by the use of innovative technology, construction methods, and materials without compromising the quality. And of course, when those changes occur, at every stage, the private party has to go back to the government party to alert them of these proposed design changes, and they should be agreeable to them. They should give no objection. And might I add as well that on road construction projects, there's usually an added layer of an independent engineering firm who sits between the two parties and is also able to review the designs and give the independent professional opinion. So in a nutshell, I would say that during the construction phase, there's always room for the private party to introduce new technologies, new designs, cost-effective solutions for construction. And that is where you see, in fact, technologies such as the building information management systems being deployed, which are a modern tool that helps in, for instance, monitoring the construction of a project, monitoring the progress. But more importantly, is a very efficient way of actually checking the quantities during the certification and payment process for a PPP, a road project. You're going to use your BIM technology, you're going to use drones and the software to calculate volumes of whatever works have been done to check against the traditional ways of measurement. So those are some of the activities that occur during construction. And of course, for engineers, it also offers an opportunity to keep one abreast, and also it offers an opportunity for our engineers to upskill because the private sector always wants to introduce the best technology and hit the highest standard on any project. So most of the projects that I've seen, you will get investment by the private sector into a lot of modern software that helps simplify things from the traditional method of undertaking construction.
Thank you, Kanyuka. I'm happy that you've spoken about emerging technologies in PPPs. You've saved me a lot of time there. What kind of innovations and advanced technologies we can look at into PPPs in the future. But I also heard you talk about another added layer for independent engineer. The former Minister of Finance, Dr. Stumbeko Msokotwane, personally told me that when the EIZ was advocating for an independent engineer, he said that is the way to go. And in his own words, he says that going forward, we make it compulsory for all PPP projects to ensure there's an independent engineer right at start, so that the independent engineer is able to compare the execution with what was earlier planned. So that is an independent. It's not for the public sector or the private sector. And I'm happy that he made those pronouncements. Going forward, we need now to come up with a framework which ensures there's a referee who's independent and ensures each entity, it could be the public sector, not sticking to what they had agreed, or the private sector, if the designs they're trying to make sure is able to highlight that as a referee, say, no, we are moving away from the design. So that is the best way to go, and I'm happy you've also mentioned it. But I want us to go into the operations, maintenance, and life cycle performance. Joseph, why is it important to involve operations and maintenance, O&M engineers early in the design phase? I know we haven't had any asset handover yet. Most of our PPPs are very early. Some others are still yet to be closed. Some others are in concession period. They're within 3 years to 5 years. But what can you foresee as emerging lessons for asset handover and transfer at the end of the PPP contracts from an engineering viewpoint? Since you've been so much involved in design, obviously this asset can do a concession period for 25 years. What have been embedded in the concession period agreement? At the end of the 25 years, what do we expect the assets to be in? And what kind of work should the public sector take such?
Thank you very much. In terms of the O&M engineers, why it is important that that they are involved. So to address that issue, what I can say is that if you look at for instance, in the traditional contracts, when you talk of the design engineers, their ultimate goal is to design something that is constructible. But when you look at the O&M, their focus will be looking at the life cycle costs of the end product. So maybe just to give an example, the design engineer may look at reducing the cost of designing something that may just end at reducing the cost of construction and constructability. While the one who's in the O&M will look at having an end product that is going to have less life cycle costs related to maintenance. So if we involve O&M engineers earlier in the project, the two will look at things differently, and the input from the O&M engineer will also help the team that is early in the project with the designs to come up with something that is going to reduce the operation and maintenance costs, and also at the end of the project at handback period stage, you hand over a project that will meet this what has been specified in the concession agreements. Ideally, if you look at the PPP Act, to require that the process for handback starts 2 years before the end of the contract. So meaning all those performance criteria that are supposed to be met, you start dealing with them from 2 years ahead of the time when the concession agreement comes to an end. So it's important that O&M and also the teams that are involved in the design, they at some stage interact so that you have a product that is going to be cost effective in terms of the life cycle costs, because for PPPs, they are long-term projects and you need something that is well developed to ensure that the whole life cycle cost is effective.
Thank you very much, Joseph.
Okay.
I think I'll hold you there. I know we are running out of time, but we need to add another 30 minutes to our discussion. You all agree with me that this is a very important discussion, and President, I think we needed 2 hours for it. But unfortunately, obviously, it will be, we cannot keep you all here, including our presenters. We asked only 1 hour from them. I know these are expensive people. Otherwise, we are going to pay them a lot of money, because this is basically free information they're giving us. But I want to get to Solomon. In terms of, you've been involved in project appraisals and planning and technical coordination of PPP initiatives. What information, based on your experience, what are the most common engineering-related pitfalls in PPP projects? As an independent, we like you having you here. All of us are engineers, but with your specs, you're wearing an economy specs 100%. What do you think are the engineering-related pitfalls in PPP projects, and what best practices do you think have proven most effective in avoiding them, either domestically or abroad? Give us information from an independent perspective. What do you think us engineers should concentrate on going forward in this PPP topic?
Thank you once again, Mr. President. From your question, I think if you look at the project life cycle, it's starting from a project development, pre-feasibility, feasibility into procurement. At concept note, mostly what is there is just a general scope of the project. But when you start getting into the pre-feasibility and feasibility stage, you find that you start unpacking the scope, where you need to have the project description and the technical specifications of the scope itself. Some projects really do not have much detailed technical specifications. So you find that even when it comes to negotiations, it tends to have a mismatch with other than the scope and the outputs, but mostly the technical specifications in relation to the cost of the project. There's sometimes a mismatch. And sometimes it becomes a gray area where, because these have not really been properly itemized, described, or specified, you do not know whether the project cost is higher or it's lower or it's just hanging in there. I think that's where much of the problem is from the few projects that we have looked at. I'm not sure if I've answered your question.
No, you have. You've given us feedback. I had given you protection, immunity. You could just say the engineers better improve in these areas for PPPs. But I think we're able to hear you. And I'm now coming to our participants online. I won't be able to take your questions directly, but you can type the questions, and the registrar is going to read those questions. Keep them slow on the topical issues that we have discussed, or any areas. It could be just even comments. So we'll be able to take maybe 3 to 4, because we've got 15 minutes. But I'm going to ask a question to the panel here as registrar packages those questions that you're writing. In terms of future trends and skills development, looking ahead, 2027 and beyond, Cuthbert, how will trends like the energy transition, artificial intelligence data centers, resilient cities, shape opportunities and challenges for engineers in PPPs? What additional skills or knowledge areas beyond core technical expertise should engineers develop to succeed and lead in PPP environments?
Yeah, I think by and large, we have an impeccable skill set of engineers in this country. And I think at their core competences, they're fairly strong. But in order for us to extract value out of these opportunities around, PPP, I think we're going to have to develop a lot of financial modeling skills. And I have seen this in many PPPs that we have been looking obviously at the office and pretty much elsewhere in the industry, that we are continuously outsourcing the financial modeling skills as engineers. So we can strengthen and should strengthen that skill set. We have fairly a healthy cohort of, construction lawyers, as it were, under the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators, and also FIDIC. FIDIC allows a lot of, adjudication workstream competences amongst engineers. And there I see a lot of skills coming up around, construction law and things like that. I believe that is also a skill that we're going to need going forward as engineers, to be able to, internalize the whole value chain around PPPs. So data centers, these are all emerging technologies, and where there is actually a huge amount of investment potential. We all know that with the emergence of AI, in fact, what we have learned is that there will not be enough energy in the world in the next 5 years to power all these data centers and the engine rooms that allow us to power AI. So clearly, there will be lots of opportunities for greenfield and brownfield energy investment projects. And we see a lot of that going through the PPP model rather than being financed by sovereign fiscals the world over. Okay, and again, you see the off-takers around this field of AI and whatnot are usually private players. The owners of, ChatGPT and Anthropic and all these other, OpenAI and whatnot. All these developers are private individuals, and it is unlikely that government will be building power plants to be able to. So I think a lot of that is going to come out from our private sector. And in our situation here, I think the PPP opportunity is going to have to be, driven quite significantly. And also, it is a time for engineers to take a deliberate position to be able to skill up around that and all the dynamics that govern it, in order for us to seize this opportunity.
Well summed up for the future by Cuthbert. I think if you've been listening and following Elon Musk on Twitter, he has been talking about this for the last 3 years, about how we can extract energy from the sun directly beyond the horizon there. Sometimes it looks mad, but look at how rich the guy has become. Yeah. And I think this is what Cuthbert is talking about. I think we are only bound by our own imagination. Once we've gotten this model, we should not think that the public should be able to build all these facilities. Look at Elon. He has built a business which is rivaling NASA. We never thought about it, with a huge government-backed budget of the USA. And now they are competing with a private company owned by Elon Musk, somebody from South Africa. So even us here, when we are driven by our imagination, government can only provide these opportunities, and these are coming up. I like what you summed up, Cuthbert. But Registrar, do we have any questions that in particular I'd like to throw to the discussants here? They have to be to the point.
Yes, Mr. President, we have one three-part question. Maybe
the three parts. Okay, no, we can distribute it. Yes, you can lead, Registrar.
So the quick questions. The questions are coming from Engineer Michael Goma. His questions are: what kind of flexibility do our engineering teams actually have to introduce innovative or highly effective designs? Number two, how can local engineers ensure they play leading roles in PPP projects instead of being limited to supporting international firms? And how can universities better align engineering education with the skills required in PPP-driven infrastructure development?
Okay, so there are three there. Kanyuka, would you handle the questions?
Yes.
Then we're going to look at the next set. Please try as much as possible to address the questions.
Okay, thank you so much. I think first of all, the first part is around innovation and flexibility during construction. I think I touched on that earlier. The beauty about PPPs is that you're not really bound by the traditional methods of doing things, because the idea of bringing a private player to the scene is to help bring innovation, of course, within reasonable bounds of the legal framework. So in terms of designs, technology, construction methods, construction materials, the private player is at liberty to introduce all of the available skills that will help deliver a cost-effective product. Remember also that any savings on a PPP do eventually get passed back to the government, because then the PPP will break even sooner, and then the public party will begin to get their revenue share sooner. So it's always the private party's interest to lower the cost of the PPP as much as possible in every way possible, without compromising quality, again, I must emphasize, but at a cost-effective delivery. Then in terms of local engineers playing a leading role in PPPs, Cuthbert touched on this. I think there is, what I see myself working on PPPs for some time now, is that I think we need to diversify as engineers from our core traditional, should I say, hardcore engineering, and begin to look at the other commercial, legal, financial aspects of PPPs. Because remember, no single trade or profession can put a PPP together. It's a collection of different expertise. You've got legal, you have commercial, financial, engineering, and so on and so forth. So what I do see is, as an advantage for an engineer, is to be able to invest in upskilling in one of the other areas. I know usually engineers that deal with projects, especially when it comes to FIDIC and all that, have a good foundation in terms of the legal know-how. But where I see us lacking most of the time is in the financial and commercial aspects. So we need to invest time to study, divert a little bit, and begin to look at business development in general. Then also, I think the third aspect is regarding universities and how they can align with required skills in PPPs. I personally think that higher institutions of learning should seriously begin to look at introducing courses in PPPs. I know we do have business courses, but also the beauty about PPPs, especially in infrastructure, I'll be biased because that's the area we're in. But we must admit as well, some of the biggest PPPs really are in engineering. So that takes a chunk. They need to have a deliberate policy in aligning and adjusting and updating their syllabuses to include a component of public-private partnership, planning, procurement, development, and packaging. We need to upskill ourselves in transaction advisory services, because all these skills are needed for you to put together or to package a PPP. And what an advantage, where I see an advantage lies usually is when, as a professional, not that you may be qualified in every aspect, but you need to have the working knowledge of each of the 3 to 4 critical expertise that bring a PPP together. That is technical, financial, commercial, and legal. So in a nutshell, that is what I would say regarding the question from the engineer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kanyuka. You have given advice also on basically how the engineering community could contribute to better shaping effective PP policies, frameworks, and implementation. What is the next question there?
So, Mr. President, I'll just ask a question that may be on a topic that hasn't been touched on in the discussions. This is from Engineer Zizwani Piri. There are certain sectors that have very low tariffs that discourage undertaking of PPPs, like the water sector. The capital requirements are quite high, but then most consumers look at water as a social good. How does the government support investments in the sector, as well as safeguard the consumers from high tariffs that commensurate to recovery of the investment by the developer?
I think very good question. And myself coming from the water sector, I'm a director on the Lusaka Water and Sanitation. And we've got very stiff KPIs given to us by the minister. We need to attract PPPs in the water sector. And I think that is one issue, the tariffs. I'll bring this question to Cuthbert. And Solomon, you can also touch on it. What are we doing to improve, attract private sector into that? Because we know water is a commodity, it's being consumed by everyone. And I think the main issue there is the tariff. It's a highly regulated environment. What are we doing about it?
Yeah, thanks so much, President Kaluba. So again, you and I know we've had all this rubbing with the sector. I used to chair the board of directors at the Southern Water and Sanitation Company. And the issues in the water sector are real. Okay, and I think it is very important for us to even start to move from this notion that has crippled us so significantly, where we keep saying water is a social good and therefore we cannot make it expensive or raise the tariffs. But the reality is that those that are able to pay are not paying enough for this water. And yet, if you look at Lusaka Water, for instance, and yet the bulk of the water network for Lusaka Water and Sanitation Company is in the affluent areas, okay? And they buy a liter, a cubic meter of water for easily maybe about, I can't remember, at one point it was like seven kwacha.
We are selling 7 kwacha a cubic meter.
A cubic meter.
And it takes us 18 kwacha to produce one.
Precisely. And yet a half liter of mineral water is 20 kwacha, yes. Which is like, yeah, so you can see it's like 1,000 times cheaper to buy water. So now, the issue is, how do we create price parity to allow investor participation in this? So there is very deliberate decisions that we need to make. And I think the conversation is developing, even amongst us engineers and also in the investment communities. We have to create an environment that is going to allow cost reflectivity. And I know there's discussions, all over the sectors that are concerned around this, to be able to try and look at maybe legislative reforms. We have to look at legal reforms and also the investment climate around this. So I think it's an active discussion. We should be able to see, if we are all able to think in one direction, we should be able to see an environment that actually allows us to be able to drive investment in this. Because it's the poor people that actually don't have this commodity as a result of it being consumed by those that actually use that water for watering their gardens, because the affluent actually don't drink that water. Yes. When you could actually take it to the poor people who are going to use it for life-saving purposes.
Yes.
So we need to create a good balance around that. And, coming from the energy space, we have seen how we've also had this tiered structure in terms of tariffs to allow those that are using more of the infrastructure to also make a contribution. Yeah. So there has to be that cross-subsidy arrangement. And I think that's going to drive investment going forward. It's a very right conversation to have.
Yeah.
And I think it can be very transformative if we manage to get the right decisions, of course.
Good response, Cuthbert. What Cuthbert is saying, I'm protecting him, is saying that let's remove politics from this. We need to now take radical decisions. Basically, the same way we've done for the energy sector. Remember, it took us very long to come up with reflective tariffs. So it starts with us engineers. We are all ambassadors in this realm. We need to remove politics around tariffs for water. Clearly, you can imagine we increased energy tariffs, electricity tariffs, but that was also impacting the water sector, by the way. What cushion did we put there? But personally, talking from the EIZ perspective, I think there's a lot of promise. I'm aware the Minister of Finance in his last address to the Parliament, he did also lament on this issue of disparity between tariffs and also production costs for water. That if government is concerned, it gives us promise that going forward, we might get cost reflective, even just to allow break even with a little profit in there. I think going forward, this is what we are expected to see to improve commercial viability in the water sector. Is there any other last question?
Yes, Mr. President, I think there's been a couple of questions around compliance. So maybe I'll just ask a general question. With the increase in PPP and donor-funded projects in Zambia, what mechanisms is EIZ putting in place to ensure that all consulting, contracting, local and foreign engineers maintain compliance and avoid being pressured into compromising standards for speed of delivery or cost?
I think this question is now addressed to the EIZ. Very unfair to the moderator. The question comes to the moderator instead of our discussants. But anyway, I think what EIZ is doing, I'll attempt to respond, is we've got a lot of experts. If you know the way the EIZ is structured, the EIZ is not secretariat or the engineering council. We are supported. Like right now, you can see these experts in this field of PPP. They're all EIZ members and other stakeholders. We bring them to the table and they disseminate information. So we act as a bridge for our fraternity and also the public. But what we are doing in terms of standards, going forward, we want to reinforce regulation. And I think you'll be able to see the next steps that we are doing. We are collaborating with the Zambia Army, the Zambia Police, the Zambia National Service. We signed an MOU with Zambia Army, and there's one in the pipeline with ZNS. We've discovered that the law enforcement agencies could help us in terms of regulation and enforcement. So not to preempt so much, I think there's a lot of work that we have done going with the Zambia Police Service. You'll be able to see that the provisions of the law are going to be implemented going forward. If you're able to get away practicing without being licensed, but it's a crime. So it will be with the Zambia Police. For instance, you've seen the RTSA, the Road Traffic and Safety Agency, established under the Road Traffic Act number 11 of 2002. The police are able to check your vehicle without the RTSA getting involved. And almost everyone now is in self-regulation. You ensure that you're within the law, you pay for your road tax, roadworthiness certificate, your insurance, because the police are going to check. Equally, the EIZ, you're going to see a similar model. The police will be able to check a site where there's engineering activities happening, and they will ask for these documents without the EIZ being there. We've got the same provisional law like the RTSA. The EIZ has got similar. We can also appoint, like Engineer Aaron Mumba was talking the other day, I heard on radio that they're appointing honorary inspectors. We also appoint honorary inspectors. And this is something we tried in the past. Of course, it was abused, but going forward, we have reinforced it, whereby we are going to appoint and issue with licenses some of our members, including yourself. If you've been in good standing, we do a due diligence, you'll be able to assist us. So that's where we are going to improve reach will be everywhere in industry, checking for compliance. I think that is one of the things we are doing. Just an attempt to answer that question. But colleagues, I think we wanted to continue with this webinar. The registrar is telling me that there's one question. I know we could have gone for 3 hours, clearly. This is a very good topic, to tell you the truth. Maybe what we'll do going forward, we are going to have at one of the, we should have a discussion, a physical discussion session, not necessarily in Livingstone. We could have it even in Lusaka, sponsored by the EIZ. One-day event, maybe half from morning to lunch. It would give us more opportunity. Maybe we arrange this at Radisson Blue, anywhere we can get one of these. It's a very rich topic, as you can see. I know a lot of people want to ask questions. We had assigned the 30 minutes, but registrar insists that one question needs to be shared. So over to the registrar.
I thank you, Mr. President. I'm not attacking any of the panelists, but I think this question is quite important and maybe hasn't been asked. Just to summarize it, in light of what was discussed in terms of the remarks by the former Minister of Finance, does the PPP unit intend to revise the PPP framework or standard concession agreements to institutionalize independent engineering consultants for construction supervision, quality assurance, contract administration, and compliance with engineering standards on all infrastructure PPP projects?
I don't want to put Solomon on the spot, but I think that was the indication. The minister wrote to us and he spoke with me personally, and I think that statement was in the public media. He was basically agreeing that going forward, all PPP projects will need to be, he was talking about the framework, it needs to be revised. And he specifically noted that the proposal from the EIZ going forward is to improve quality. We need an independent engineer. So maybe just to respond to that question, it depends ourselves. We are going to work with government. The PDU is here. We'll sit together, private sector, ourselves as regulator, to come up with a robust framework which will protect the interests of not just the public sector, but also the private sector. Remember, if there are failures in the project, the private sector is losing money because they have to correct them. That's not what we want as government. We don't want the private sector to be losing in failed projects because it compromises their project. And you know, since this is a collaboration, it's a partnership, it's like a marriage. You do not win as one partner in a marriage. You know, for the marriage to work, it has to be mutually beneficial to the couples. So the private sector has to win on one hand, and the public sector needs to win. Then you can appraise a successful PPP. So we want to protect the interests of the private sector. Their proposed designs which were approved, they should be implemented accordingly without departure. If there's any departure, it should be substantiated, and the private sector has to, a private consultant has to review it and say, no, this is in accordance with our understanding, this is the way to go. They'll make savings, but they will not compromise the quality of the project. And I think this is the way it needs to go. Before it even gets into arbitration where they spend so much money, the consultant is on the project and needs to advise accordingly. So maybe to answer that question, going forward, that's what we expect. And the beauty of this is that we are going to be brought on the table and we are going to participate in the reforms that will come going forward. I've tried to answer that, but going forward, I think we need to come to an end, unfortunately. I just want to thank the discussants for reserving time. As you can see, these are highly skilled researchers and technocrats. They've added significant value to the EIZ, but I can promise that going forward, we are going to have another discussion around this. This is a topic we cannot exhaust within 1 hour, 30 minutes. There's a lot of appetite for it. I personally received phone calls from colleagues in Detroit, in the United States, who are talking about the time we are putting it. It's not a good time for them. They want to participate in this discussion. So this is a very rich discussion topic, and I think we're going to have similar ones. Maybe we'll get into energy. And I want you, the members of the EIZ who participated, you can give the feedback to Secretariat. What areas do you want us to tackle? Can you give suggestions how we can improve these webinars, particularly even for PPPs? Kindly contact the Secretariat. Thank you very much. I thank the participants, the discussants, Cuthbert here at the Engineering House, Kanyuka out there joining us virtually, Joseph and Solomon. Thank you very much. And I also thank all the EIZ members, contractors. I'm also aware about economists who are not even engineers who participated. Robert Mtonga with the Lobito corridor. I'm aware that you've been online and you told me about this. Thank you very much, colleagues, and good evening.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody, and have a lovely Friday.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.